Get started. We have number one, Director Tech is going to give a presentation, and then after that we will do public comment. For those of you that are here to give public comment, I have 3 forms here. If you do want to speak, there are speaker request forms over there. Feel free to fill them out and we'll get you seen. Director Tech, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll get started here. There we go. Okay, this discussion had its origins in the last working session that we had. We had talked about this item, and I made the commitment that we'll make a presentation as to the utility billing ordinance update that was started back in October of last year. So what changed? What are we here to talk about today? There were 2 changes in our utility billing ordinance. Most of it is rooted in water, because water, that's where our utility billing department is located. So they do the billing for water, sewer, and solid waste. So anyway, these are the 2 items that changed in ordinance, and they both identify that any accounts, either a change to an account or any new accounts, shall be in the name of the owners of the premises. So that means that if you're a property owner, the utility billing must be in the owner's name rather than a tenant, a relative, LLC, although an LLC could own a property, so it could be in their name as well. What are the impacts on current tenants and property owners? If you have a current tenant, if your landlord ran out a home, there's no change. If that tenant's been in there for many years and will be in there for many more years, there's no change necessary. There's no time limit. We haven't said after X many years there will be a necessity to get it changed to the owner's name. They can remain this way as long as that tenant is in the rental property. So what that means is when the account's closed, any deposits that were paid by the tenant to set up the account will go back to that tenant that was in there. They're the ones that paid the new account fee and then also the deposit fee, so that deposit will go back to the tenant. And as I described earlier, any changes then to that tenancy of that property, it will be required to be in the property owner's name. There's been some talk about affordable housing and what these changes will mean to that. At the end of the day, there's no net cost change expected to the tenant. In fact, long term, this will be a benefit to the tenants that are renters. The owner sets up an account. That account remains active forever until it's either sold or transferred to a new owner. So that means every tenant doesn't have to pay a new account fee and a deposit. It's a one-time thing on the property, so that'll be much more affordable for tenants when they move in. They don't have to pay those fees. But then again, there's agreements between the landlords and the tenants. The landlords can do what they deem appropriate to cover those costs spread out over time. So once again, though, that would be a benefit to the tenant to not have to pay those fees when they move in. There's been some discussion. We've received comment that, well, me as the landlord then, how does that affect my credit? Well, the City of Rapid City, we don't report to any credit bureaus. So the account holders that we have are not recorded to a credit bureau, so it will have no impact to anybody's credit rating or credit history. There are some other concerns that were raised by property owners. I know last meeting we had some property owners here that were very concerned about. There's no checks on, well, the tenants can just use as much as they want, and we've got no way to control that. The landlord doesn't have to pay the bill. They can make it the responsibility of the tenant to pay the bill, and our utility billing has the capability of sending a bill to the tenant, and then also the landlord would get that same bill just so they know what the usage is. And once again, the landlords certainly have the ability in their agreements to specify that the tenant is responsible for the bill, and if the bill doesn't get paid, then same thing. The bill would, or the water would be shut off until that bill is paid. One issue that we've had in the past is a lot of times landlords are curious about, well, how much water are they using? How much, you know, what's going on inside that property? Well, based on the bill being in the tenant's name, we didn't have the ability to give that information out. So now with this, tenants, or landlords rather, will have the ability to see actually what type of usage is going on inside their property. Some other concerns. Property owners say they weren't aware of the change. Well, the difficulty we have in this town is we don't know what our rentals, there are many properties in this town that are owned by people that other people are living on, and it may be a landlord-tenant situation, it may be a family issue, many reasons why the property owner may have someone else living in their property. So we weren't able to discern a finite list of who is a landlord in what are rental properties.
Say that again?
We weren't able, we don't have a list of who's a landlord, what properties are rental properties in Rapid City. We don't know that. We did our best to compile the information based on owner-occupied status, comparing names on bills versus the ownership of a property, and we came up with about 2,000 properties that we thought may fit that bill. So ultimately, we did send a letter to those folks. We did go through the proper ordinance amendment process. We started back in October of last year with the first reading of this ordinance, gave a presentation to the Public Works Committee. That was before these working sessions were started. There were questions asked about this very issue. We answered those. We went on to the next meeting, which was a working session. We didn't give the presentation again, but we took questions, and I believe there were a couple questions asked, and we were answered. So then ultimately that ordinance went into effect, and I believe it was right around the first of the year. So, and then when changes were made, people obviously contacted utility billing and were informed of the change of ordinance and the requirements for it to be in the property owner's name. Benefits to this change. When you own a property, the service lines are the responsibility of the owner. So your water service line and your sewer service line going out to the public mains is responsibility of the owner. Well, situations that occurred were the utility account was in a tenant's name. If there was an issue with that service line, then the tenant was responsible for that. That's not fair to the tenant to have to replace a sewer service line or a sewer main. That's the property owner's responsibility. Additionally, this protects property owners, so they know, now will know if there isn't running water in a unit for non-payment. So many times in the past we've been contacted by landlords that did not know that their tenant in there had been living in the property for a number of months without running water. So once again, this will provide that information to property owners, that they'll know what the status of the utilities are on their property. And then on the flip side of the service lines, the tenants, they won't be held responsible for the service line issues if there are any. And then ultimately, we're still looking at data, but over the years, we have a number of uncollectible bills that, for one reason or another, were walked away from and are uncollectible. It looks to be about in the $150,000 to $200,000 a year in fees that are uncollectible. This will, I'm not saying that this change will eliminate that, but certainly will help, certainly on a landlord-tenant issue where some folks just walk away. So, I believe that's all I have today. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. If you want to take some additional comment, I take some notes and respond to those questions.
I think that would be a good thing to do. Mr. Evans. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Evans, you have the floor.
Yeah, I do have one question. Thank you, Mr. Tech, for always speaking so intelligently and intelligibly over the microphone. I always understand every word you say. Everybody be aware. Some of us are kind of hard of hearing, but he uses the mic well, so thank you for doing that. Anyhow, I'm curious, how does it work when you're a landlord and they have to pay an electric bill? They walk off with that. How does it work when they have to pay a gas bill and they walk off without paying that? I mean, because that's really the comparable thing. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody know here? Any? And so the power company does not, for instance, not hook up the next tenants. They have to apply for another water. And I guess I just needed to know that point of information. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
I was just going to ask, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask that we hear from our people who are here to public comment, and then I want to reserve the right to ask some questions of Mr. Tech at the time. Thank you.
We're going to go to Mr. Roberts first, and then we'll go to public comment if that's all right. Mr. Roberts, go ahead.
You know, I would like to listen to public comment too before I make my comments, if that's all right with you.
Perfect, great. We have three, if there's anyone else, we have 3 public comments forms and 4 on the way. Thank you, Mr. Tech. Tracy Parkinson with Kaler Property Management, thank you. Great, please. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you for taking our comments and giving us a chance to share our thoughts. And I have previously emailed all of you our thoughts and some of the positions that we're taking. And he addressed some of the issues as well. But one of the biggest things we're going to run into is, by law, we have to get security deposits back to tenants within a certain amount of time. Water bills run approximately 30 days behind. We have to notify a tenant within 2 weeks if we're retaining any of their deposit, or we refund it. A lot of times we can go ahead and refund a deposit within that 2-week time frame, so we don't have to do that notification. Now, we will have to notify every single tenant that we're withholding their deposit till we get their final water bill. It's going to cost us more time, more effort, more supplies, and everything. And then the other thing he talked about shutting utilities off. I don't know if I'm assuming the city can shut utilities off, but by law, as landlords, we cannot shut someone's utilities off. If they're not paying the bill and we get a call from a utility company that they're not paying it, we have to keep it, we have to put it in the landlord's name, the owner's name. They have to start paying the bill. By law, we can't shut utilities off on people. So that's going to be a downside for us. I mean, we don't like doing that anyway, but we can't by law. And I think it's Rapid Valley Water that right now, if a tenant moves out owing a bill, they will not put it in another tenant's name until that bill is paid. So if we do have a tenant that owes water when they move out, we have to pay that bill. And so that would be an option for you too. instead of making us, I mean, we have a lot of single-family properties, and so billing that out, eventually every month is going to be quite burdensome. But if all we had to do was occasionally go and pay a bill, it would just make it a lot easier. And he did mention the fact that we've had several of our owners, I mean, that's why they hire us. They hire us to take care of all of this for them. And the way the ordinance is written now, we, as a property management company, we can't even call city finance and put it in the owner's name. The owner has to physically make the phone call. A lot of our owners don't live in Rapid. Some of our owners live overseas. So it's just going to make it not very easy for them to have to do that. So like, as it stands right now, we don't even have the ability as the management company to make that phone call for them. So we're having to call our owners, they're having to make a phone call. And like I said, that's what they hire us to do. So let's see what some of my other points were. I guess if you're willing to share tenants' utility averages, that would help. But right now, we're looking at having to collect security deposits. We have no idea what that usage is, and we can't get that information. Everybody's usage is going to be different. Some of our properties are small, some of them are large, some have irrigation systems, some don't. So it's going to be really hard to figure out an average and just make this work in a clean manner for everybody. Does anybody else have anything? Okay. I think that's all I have to share. But our biggest concern is just being there for our owners and being able to abide by the laws that are written that we have to abide by, and doing that in a timely manner. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Parkinson. Mr. Kaler? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. I'm David Kaler, owner of Kaler Property Management. We run about 500 units. Plus, I'm an investor and have been in the city of Rapid City for ages. Just speaking, basically agreeing to what Tracy's brought forward, which she manages our property management division. I want to speak to the gentleman that basically went through kind of some of the pros and cons. First off, there is our average leases are 6 to 12 months. So to say there's a benefit in the fact that this only really affects those people, everybody's grandfathered in. Within 12 months, everybody will basically have rolled through most rental properties, and that's where that isn't a big issue. Bad debt will be passed on to our tenants, okay? So it is I disagree where he says there isn't going to be a cost to tenants. And tenants normally, when it comes to price point and incomes, it has a tendency to be, let's just say, some of our lower income folks. That bad debt will be passed on. We are going to be charging an additional deposit ahead of time based on the way the laws or what you've kind of put forward, so that if they skip out, and because of the time limit that this puts us under, like Tracy had shared, we will be collecting or making sure that we're a 0 or 0 plus. So the fact is there's going to be an extra added cost onto tenants because of the way this system is. So I totally disagreed where he said there isn't any added cost to a tenant. Second thing is that, or the third thing is that it made a comment about never had a tenant, pay for repairs, that because of this, a tenant wouldn't be responsible for paying for repairs. I can't, in the 44 years I've been in this business, I can't ever remember charging a tenant for a water line or a sewer line or anything like that. Our leases pretty much stipulate that we as the landlords are responsible for taking care of it. So just because it's in a tenant's name, I have never ever had a tenant responsible for paying for a repair bill. Also, the electric and MDU, this is totally different from what we currently have with Black Hills Power and Light and MDU. The tenants get it in their name, they keep it in their name, they pay their bills, and in the event that they don't pay bills, then it's up to that utility company, and legally what they're bound to as to what they can shut off and what they can't shut off. And again, when it comes to water and shutting utilities off in the wintertime, if they don't pay nowadays, you just can't walk in and shut stuff off. So they stay in the unit. If they're non-payment of rent and we have to kick them out, water continues to go. We don't have any teeth in that scenario. We're kind of at the whim of what they elect to pay. The other thing is it was stated that owners' names are public record. And I can't tell you, I do not have one of my properties in my personal name. It's in either LLCs or trust or whatever. And there's several reasons for that. One of that is for the logistics and the liability issue. And the other issue is specifically what we're doing here. I hire a management company to manage my stuff. I don't want calls at 10 o'clock at night. And believe me, when I call down the water department and want to put it in one of my LLCs or trusts, they're not going to let it happen. They want it in my personal name. They won't even let my wife call and put it in my name. So these are just some additional add-ons to what Tracy said. And really, I think this is a bad ordinance. I think it needs to go back the way it was. Tracy is a lot nicer than me. She wants to work with you guys. I'm looking at it and saying this needs to go back where it was before. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Mr. Kaler. Next up, Mr. Todd Holland. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you. Todd Holland, NWE Management Company, and this is going to be kind of short for me because thank you to the Kaler Group for being so efficient on bringing forth basically all the items I had on my list. I do want to just track back on a couple of things. I know that at one point in time, we just heard that there could be a split bill sent to the owner and to a tenant. I was under the impression that couldn't happen prior to this meeting, so I'd just like that double checked on. The other portion of this is then as far as the landlord capacity to move into the knowledge part of what is not there today is pretty important to what these management companies need to do, ours included. If we can't function with information, it just makes it hard on our tenants too. One of the things that does happen with other utility companies, I mentioned it to Mr. Roberts earlier, and Mr. Evans brought it up, is, we have landlord reverts into our MDU and our Black Hills Power. That basically goes into either ownership or it goes into landlord name, and maybe that's something that needs to be looked into. If we have delinquency on the tenant's behalf, we immediately get notified within the billing cycle saying, guess what, you've got somebody behind, please fix it. I think that might also help with the $200,000 or so that was brought up on delinquent bills for the water billing for the community. That's all I have, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Here from the perspective as an owner who currently had a tenant was not paying their Black Hills energy bill, the electric bill. Again, it was complicated because I got an email. So what the Black Hills Energy Company does with an owner of the property, I am on the primary. The tenants get the bill in their name, and when the tenant does not pay their bill, I get an email saying this property was not paid. And the good thing about Black Hills Energy, they allow the management companies access to the information. So once I call Kaler Property Management, they can call the Black Hills Energy Company to determine when was the last time the tenant paid, and how many payments are they behind? So I would like to see the city look at some way that me as an owner and the tenant and the management company have access to that, and that we revert back to the way the billing was occurring in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate that. First of all, I would like to thank all the property owners and rental management people who contacted us. This is how government is supposed to work. If something is put into place, a law, ordinance, or whatever, and if it doesn't work or if people don't like it, contact us, and then we're supposed to take another look. So I thank you all for reaching out and contacting us. I'm going to start philosophically here. It seems like ever since COVID hit, landlords have been taking a massive whooping in the media, everywhere, that every landlord's bad, every landlord's a bad guy or bad gal or bad management company. And there are bad apples in every line of work, but I know a lot of people in Rapid City who own property. I know, like Kahlers and others who have been vital parts of our community for years that have been in this business, and how much they reach out and try to take care of their tenants and work with them and keep a roof over their head and a safe place for them to be. So I don't like the fact that landlords have been continually being beat up, and just wanted to say that because they're a very, very important part of our community, whether they have one rental property and rent out one bed, or if they are large property management. You folks are vital to our community, and I thank you for what you do for making it possible to have a place for people to have a place to live. All right. This, as Mr. Tech said, Tesh,
Tech.
Bill, I'm sorry, I always say your name wrong. Someone?
Dale.
Tech, Dale Tech. Mr. Tech said that this came in October and went through Public Works and came to us. I'm going to say, just for myself, and if it sounds ignorant, I apologize, as it came through, my thought was that the person living there was responsible and that they had to sign up and et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to throw the ignorance egg at me for missing the ball on this one, I'll take it. And the thing went through. There was many, many things going on, and I will take ownership of saying that maybe I didn't think this one through enough before I voted and approved it. So here we are. My questions that I will put out there, and I hope someone will answer. First of all, Madam Chair, may I ask Tracy from Kahlor a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Tracy, if you could just fill in a gap on a couple things you said. You have to return security deposits in a certain amount of time. Is that by state law or your business practices, or how does that work?
That's state codified law.
Okay, and that's within 30 days, is that correct?
We have to notify them within 14 days of their move out, whether we're retaining their deposit or we have to refund it. And then after that, we have another 30 days. But this will mean that we're going to have to give that 2-week letter to every tenant, whereas now sometimes we can just get it done within that 2-week time.
Right. Thank you. And then another question, and the last gentleman, Mr. Holland, made reference to this. If the tenant doesn't pay the bill for their utility, water, gas, whatever, it can be referred back to the owner to have to pay? Is that correct?
No.
I made a note here when you were speaking. It said if they get behind, the landlords can't shut off the utilities, the landowner is notified and they take over before
Our
to pay the
policy
bill.
is if we're notified that a tenant's behind, we will take care of it if we have to keep the water from being shut off. But I think right now, the way the city is set up is the tenant, it's in their name, so they're responsible for it when all is said and done.
I'm not asking about the city part, I'm asking about other utilities.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what Todd said. They have reverts, and if they get behind, then they notify us that they're behind, and then they'll put it back in the owner's name. And then, yeah, it's the owner's obligation to get it caught up, and then we work with the tenant for them to get it back in their name, or
Well,
we
that
go through
prac-
another process
Thank you. That practice is in place right now,
with MDU and Black Hills Power. and
right,
Light.
and has been for some time.
Yes,
Do you see that as something that works?
yes. Because every time we take on a new property, then we fill out a revert form to those companies, and that way, they know we manage the property, the owner has given them permission to talk to us, so they will tell us, they can tell us that a tenant is behind so that we can stay ahead of it and keep it caught up and keep it current. And we can all know what's going on before it gets too far behind.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Jen?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't get
Jan.
your last name. I apologize.
Pauli, Pauli.
Thank you. So have there been times in your history of being a property owner that you've had to pay utilities for gas or electric, any of those?
Most currently, it was the electric bill from Black Hills Energy. We got an email from Black Hills Energy showing the rental property address and the account number and the fact that it had not been paid. So I contacted Kaler Property Management. They could not talk to Black Hills until I went to Black Hills and talked to them and says, please allow Kaler Property Management access to this particular account. We paid the energy bill through Kaler Property Management. They paid it, and they followed up with the tenant to get the tenant to pay. So basically, each account at Black Hills Energy has me as the owner, has the management company access, and it has the tenant who applies, signs up for service, and then when they leave, they disconnect. If that tenant does not pay the last bill, again, I would get the email, Kaler Property Management would know right away, and we would make sure that it was paid. So I would see that as a model for the city to set up for the water bill.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Dale, could you come up to the, or Dale, yeah, could you come up to the mic?
We do have a late-coming public,
Oh,
a
okay,
public
sure.
comment that just came in. Do we want to?
That's okay. I don't think it'd be productive at this point.
Okay.
May I continue? Sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Dale, and first of all, yes, I appreciate the fact that you come up and explain all this stuff. And these questions and these things, I hope you or none of our people think are attacks on what you're doing or not questioning or wondering. I have great trust and faith in you and our staff. This is our process to ask questions. So I want to remove that shroud and dive into the business that we're here for. Okay? Thank you. So as we look at this, and you made a comment about how this could possibly help with affordable housing, because the fees and the turn-on fees and that kind of thing could be not have to be paid every time. Does the city have any kind of a sliding fee scale for the turn-on fee or any of that for people based on their income?
No, it's a set fee,
Okay, and how much is that?
$45.
Okay, and has the city looked at the model that Black Hills Energy or MDU or any of the providers use in creating this ordinance?
We have not. We have some limitations in our utility billing software. I don't know what those limitations are. We are collecting the information as we're hearing the comments today, and we'll fully investigate the ability or not to be able to do a revert, for instance. As I stated earlier, one of the biggest issues we have is we don't know who is a landlord. We don't know who the property owner is. We don't know if there's a management company. So that's the first hurdle that we would have to overcome, is identifying who's managing the property. We don't know that. You know, the City of Rapid City has allowed for years and years and years for tenants to open accounts for their utilities, city utilities.
Is there a way that when the tenant would come down to open the account, they would have to provide that information, state if they are the owner or not, and if not, who is?
Well, absolutely. I think Ms. Paulai identified that she had to notify the utility company that she was the owner and a management company was managing the property. So really, it would be incumbent, I think, upon the owner to notify the city that, hey, I'm the owner, I've got a management company, here's the legal owner, and not just rely on the tenant, because the tenant may not have all that information.
Sure, okay. And one of the things I wrote down here and circled is, I would have a hunch that a big part of going to this was to reduce the amount of uncollectible bills. Was that a reason to go to this?
So that's part of the reason, yeah. And the other part of the reason is we don't know who is owning what property. That's been a struggle for us for quite a long time.
Right. Dale has done a terrific job for us throughout the city, trying to find ways to save money, collect money, and do these things, and that's his job, and that's one of the things he's supposed to do, and he does well. So bringing this forward makes all kinds of sense. That covers my questions. Thank you.
If I could add just one comment, I appreciate your comments about landlords. I feel the same way. They play a very important part of housing in our city, and this by no means is an attack on landlords from our perspective. This is trying to run our utility the most efficiently for all people. I mean, for single-family residents, owners themselves, businesses. We want to make sure that our utility is stable and that rates are stable as well.
Chairman, I appreciate the extension of the time to let me question. We probably have a lot of the same questions, so thank you very much. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Great, Mr. Nordstrom. All yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was expecting Mr. Solomon to take it next because he was in the queue. You certainly can have the floor. No?
Go ahead.
Richie, go ahead. I'll wait. I had to step out for a minute, so I didn't know if I'd be back.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess primarily where I'm coming from is what Mr. Tech finished up his presentation on is the uncollectibles. Could you remind us again about approximately how much uncollectibles we have?
Well, there's a difference between delinquents and uncollectibles. Uncollectibles is they're gone. We've sent them to a collection agency, and we haven't received any monies back from those accounts that were walked away from. It averages between $150,000 to $200,000 a year.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the council that a lot of that is passed on to the other water users. So when that uncollectible is, it's got to be made up in some fashion. So just a reminder. And I don't know, Mr. Tech, at this point, I don't know if landlords or property managers are all the same. We've heard from a couple, maybe an additional, but I don't know if their policies are all the same. Have you got any more knowledge you can share with us about that? And I realize that that we're kind of in a tough spot because we don't know who the landlords are.
Right, and we don't necessarily know who the management companies are either, and that's why, pertinent to Mr. Jones' comments, we would have to start compiling that based on new accounts being opened. So, yeah, we don't know. I don't know what the agreements are between landlords and management companies. We don't know what the agreements are between landlords and tenants either.
Thank you. And then one of the other comments that was made on this is, do we have the capacity for this bill sharing, or is it not so much bill sharing, but information of the bill going to the landlords? Is that possible?
I can't speak to that. That's something we'll have to get back to you on. I don't know the details of that.
And then the last question I have here is, we're asked to compare with the electric and the gas utilities. They are regulated by the PUC, if I'm not correct. It is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, and they have certain laws and regulations on that. Whereas the city, if I remember right, we do not comply, or we're not held accountable to the PUC. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Thank you. So I'd be concerned about, it's okay to take a look at that model, but the PUC has more jurisdiction over how the other utilities are handled versus what the city can do. And since we're not part of the, we set our own policies, we set our own ordinances on that. So I'd be very careful about using the electric and the gas. I don't have a problem with looking at them, but I'd be very careful about using them as a model for the water utilities. That's all I've got at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just to clarify, this is residential and commercial properties, right?
Yes,
We're not
any-
just doing
right,
residential.
that's correct.
I thought that, I just wanted to throw that out. I have two more people in the queue. Mr. Evans, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom, for pointing that out, because that's a really, really valid point. And it just goes to show, no matter how often we try to make government like business and business like government, they're the opposite. Government is kind of the opposite of business. No business has to please all people all the time. If all employees aren't on board, they get different employees. We try and please all people all the time. Which brings up the point that I bet if we just polled people and they said, should we be helping out landlords to pay these bills, they'd say, no, that's the cost of them doing business. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's kind of the response we'd get from people, but I don't know if that's the solution. I know it's probably not. And it seems like our meters, these accounts are linked to a meter, whereas you go with Verizon or something else, or Midco, and you run up a giant bill and never pay it. I think it's linked to your Social Security number, and they're not probably going to let you keep running up these big bills and then open another account or something without getting their money back. So this is a completely different model altogether. Mr. Kaler, who I think I've known since high school, I'm pretty sure. You know, the inconvenience of getting calls at night, I just tell you, some of the city council things we've received in the last few months, we'd be happy if that's the worst kind of thing we ever got. And as far as the inconvenience of having to maybe reissue these things after another 30 days, it might be inconvenient, but it also might be what we end up having to do. Because again, I go back to, I'm not sure that people see it as valid for the city to be absorbing some of these bills when it's not the city's cost of business. I mean, we're trying to just keep our infrastructure paid for as it is. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got quite a few questions on this. This might take a while. So Dale, can I ask you, have we ever had a tenant that had to replace a service line on water or sewer?
No, but we've run into issues where a curb box or a curb stop has failed, and they've been responsible for that.
The tenant?
Yes, the owner of the account.
Huh, that's interesting. Did they pay it?
In some cases, yeah.
Wow. I've never heard of such a thing. That's very, very interesting. So these notices that were sent out, they were sent to every address, I would imagine, in there, because you don't know who the landlords are. Because I know none of our properties, we got a notice on it. And that is an issue. I agree, that's been an issue for years, getting notices to a rental property, because 99.9% of the time, the landlords don't get it. The tenants just throw it in the trash. And I have no issue whatsoever having a revert on the water. I know that Rapid Valley's got a good policy on it, and I think we should look at the way they did it. And I know there's a couple other communities in the state that do it that way too. And I also understand the uncollectible. You know, it's difficult, but when you do take those uncollectibles and you turn them over into the land, as being the landlord's responsibility, that is going to affect affordable housing. Whether you think it's not going to or not, it is going to affect it. Because every landlord in here, when you get that, you're either going to combine that into the one property you have, the two properties you have, or the 500 properties that you have, but it's going to get paid. So the owners of these properties in the long run aren't paying, it's the tenants that are going to be paying it, and the way they're going to be paying it is going to be in increased rents. So, you know, it's kind of a catch-22 on it. I think that the easiest way to do it, and I heard you know, the mention between residential and commercial is quite a bit different. And, you know, in some of the commercial properties that I've been involved with, you know, we have a master meter and we may have 8 or 10 units in there and we pay all the water, and then we triple net them out. We figure out what that water is, and if it's more than it was last year, then we increase it into the triple net. So, and that's what's going to happen with the rents on these properties the way it is right now. I mean, their rents are going to go up by whatever their usage is, you know, and if they don't pay it, you know, and that's one of the things too, because I've heard people come in here and say, you know, if we give complete control, you know, or if we turn this over to the landlords and the tenants just have, you know, they can use whatever they want, they're going to be using it without, you know, really keeping an eye on what they're using. And I have seen that in properties where, you know, all of the utilities are paid by the landlord. You know, you'll have somebody that has their heat way up, you know, opens the front door in the wintertime to cool it down instead of turning down the thermostat. You know, will keep their bathtub running so their cat or their dog has somewhere to drink. That was kind of an interesting one that I seen about 15 years ago in a rental property. But, you know, because we couldn't understand why the water was so high all the time in it, because they were paying the utilities in it. Well, we found out. So, you know, there's a lot of things here. I think there's some good models out there. I think that if the city would look at, again, Rapid Valley Water, I think is a good place to start. Look at them. I think most reputable landlords don't care if the city knows that this is a rental property. And I think that most of them would work with the city. You know, and just to make a point, you know, a couple years ago I tried to work with the city and I came in front of the council because I wanted the city to waive a $100 fine on a property that we had mowed. And the council refused to do it. So I went in and on every one of my rentals, I hired a lawn service company and a snow removal company. And it increased the rents of every one of my properties $100 a month. Well, that's not affordable housing. That's not why I got into it. That's not what I wanted and wasn't my model. But it, and excuse me, it just made me so mad I didn't want to be put in that position ever again. So it was my tenant's responsibility at that time, and somebody dropped the ball. I ended up paying for it, but ultimately they ended up paying for it with higher rents. And that's what's going to happen here unless we find out an easier way to make this work, not only for the landlords, but for the tenants. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I'm going to jump to Lance Lehman real quick, just for the time. We're only on number 1.
Thank you, Laura. Dale, do you think we could put something on Monday night's agenda to reverse this and then come at it again? Because I really do think there needs to be some change to what was proposed and what was approved. And I even think the landlords are agreeable to some of what has happened and the reversion of the bills. And
What I would recommend, if that is the desire of the city council, is to go ahead and, this item will be on the agenda, and if you want to go ahead and reverse this portion of those changes that were made, give staff the direction to do that on Monday night, and then we'll come back through the ordinance amendment process to get that changed, if that's the desire of the council.
I kind of hearing that from the majority of my colleagues, but
We have 2
so it
more.
will be on Monday night's agenda to, we can certainly make the change back to how it was if we needed to.
Or even just
We can
address
start
it.
the process, I
Okay,
think.
thank you.
Yep, because we still have 2 people in the queue. We're only on number 1, and we have a whole other agenda to get through. And plus, I believe we'll have a full council on Monday.
Madam Chair, I've yet to speak on this item. May I?
So, oh, yeah, Mr. Solomon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lehman. I think that's a good suggestion. I think considering what we're hearing and what we're learning and discovering, I think one of the options we have on the table is to revert back to our policy regarding how we charge accounts until we iron out some of these details. That might be something worth discussing and voting on. I think Mr. Roberts brought up a really good point, as I heard, I believe, from some of the folks here. However well-intended we are, sometimes these kind of actions that that we take as a city have unintended consequences. And if one of our stated priorities is helping out with affordable housing, those costs always get put back onto the renter, always. I mean, it's not as though the landlords themselves have the margins to create, additional burden of a water bill. And I think the primary concern is that folks will use more water if they are not the ones paying for it. And then not having a mechanism on the backside to get that out of the security deposit or whatever else will mean that that's put on to folks who are already struggling to make ends meet, paying monthly rent. And so when it goes up another $20, $30 a month, whatever it ends up being, however that's spread out, that's quite a bit when you don't have much. So I think that's one of the reasons why I want to consider looking at this, is because of the impact it will have. And anything that we can do in terms of regulation to keep the price down or the costs down not only helps the landlords. This is not about helping out landlords as much as it is about helping out folks who are living in the homes that the landlords provide. And quite frankly, that's many, many people. I do not want to demonize landlords. I don't want to, I believe many of them in management companies mean very well, are trying their best to keep up with the rising costs of everything, just like everybody else. So I'm in favor of continuing to look at this and saying there's still more work here to do, and then coming back to the drawing board. So thank you for letting me take that time.
Great. Great. Mr. Tech, do you want to add anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you for everyone that showed up to discuss this matter. We will continue it on Monday, the 1st, at the council meeting at 6:30 in these chambers. Okay, thank you again. All right, we're moving right along. Director Beegler, Parks and Recreation, 2 through 5.
Thank you very much. 2 through 5 are all requests for authorization to purchase equipment for the Parks Department. Item number 2 is a mid-sized tractor that we would like to purchase. We would be trading in 2 units which are old and would go toward the purchase of this new piece of equipment. Item number 3 is a mid-sized pickup for the cemetery. Number 4 is a small dump truck for the Parks Division. And item number 5 is a large dump truck that would replace an aging dump truck in the Parks Division. All of these would be purchased either off of Sourcewell Purchasing Alliance or locally from companies that are matching state bid.
They budgeted?
Yes, they are. They're all budgeted in Parks and Recreation operations.
All of them are?
Correct.
Mr. Jones, do you have a question about a specific item? All yours.
Thank you. A question for Pauline, if I may, in Finance. This may seem like a lame new guy question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So would the billing for all of these come through at the same time, or would it come through at different times? And this is a lot of money all at once, and I just don't know what our process is for handling big purchases like this and that kind of thing.
We don't actually start the process to make payment on any of this stuff until the product has been received. So in these cases where they're vehicles and equipment, it all depends on the supplier, and sometimes there's a 6-month delay depending on their production line as well. So it all depends on them. So more than likely, you will not see them all at the same time to be paid.
So that's not a concern at all, that this is all going to whammo and hit us?
No.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Director Beegler. Director Sumption, 6 through 14.
Okay, 6 is standard to get our volunteers to be included in our workman's compensation insurance. 7, at the end of December, we're showing $33.3 million in our general fund cash balance. Keep in mind, about $18 million of that is from our COVID reimbursements from the state. that we're still trying to decide what exactly should be done with that. 8, the sales tax through November is much better than we anticipated at 3.08%. We should be getting our first December payment at the beginning of February. More than likely, it will not come in January. I know the newspaper has been asking about if we're going to end on that high of a note, and Daryl did a great job responding to her. Our concern, in a normal year, I think that we could maintain that 3% increase. However, with the L&I not being held, we are going to definitely see what kind of economic impact that has on our sales tax with them not having their event this year. Number 9, that is equipment from both parks and the police department. Number 10, get my papers. That is also from the police department. For radios, they are in the process of replacing radios for the new state radio requirements. Number 11, that is our gross receipts bond. So that is being paid out of the BBB tax. The original bond was back in 2008. This will be the second time that we refinance it for lower interest rates. While the savings aren't huge, it's around $100,000 is what we're anticipating. It will definitely help the Civic Center with cash flow in a year where we're opening a new facility. So this will assist them. 12, this is something that we do every year. If you want specifics on it, Don would be happy to answer your questions, but basically it's an agreement with the state or the federal for joint arrests, and then we get a share of the money for whatever they receive on those. On 13, those abatements, a lot of those are actually city properties that we purchased. The city is tax exempt from property tax, so we have to get those abated. And then David Snyder, the property was demolished. There's another Rapid City Peace Officers that it's a tax exempt property. Donald Back, the house was fire damaged, so they're reflecting the total loss of that by reducing his taxes per acres. They're abandoned mobile homes, and they're going to dispose of them, and same with Northwest Engineering. And then finally, on number 14, when we originally printed the minutes, we printed it as just a motion and failed to include the actual resolution. So this will correct the minutes to include the resolution for de-annexing property. And in the future, we'll make sure that the verbiage is such so that we hopefully don't miss it.
Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pauline, item number 6, we've got all these RSVP volunteers. Would you tell the people, you are responsible for the RSVP group, and would you tell the people, Ann and Dave Uhas, Ann Hines and Dave Uhas, they're doing a fantastic job, and the recognition of the RSVP volunteers this last weekend was tremendous. We had a great turnout, and I just wanted to say thank you for heading up this group, and they're doing a fantastic job, and it's really been a massive turnaround for what that group has done. Dave and Ann have done a tremendous, thank you.
Richie, I can't agree with you more. They have taken this program that we thought at one time was going to die a slow death, and not only has that survived, but it's been expanded into the Northern Hills, and they are doing fabulous with it. So thank you for your comments.
You're welcome. Yield.
Mr. Solomon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good point, Richie. I remember when we had to override a veto to save that program, so that's a good deal. Can you remind me, Pauline, what the amount of money there is in the COVID again, from the state?
So we were originally allocated about $5 million. I forget the number, the exact number.
Okay.
It might have been 17.2. And the state decided that even when we hit that maximum that they had originally allocated to us, that we could continue putting in reimbursement requests. And so at the end of the day, we received over $19 million.
19 million?
Right.
One-time use?
One-time money. The majority of that did go into the general fund because that's the majority of where the expenses were that were incurred for COVID. The majority of that being police and fire salaries and benefits. There are some dollar amounts that went to some other funds, like the Civic Center got less than $30,000. The water got some, wastewater got some. I can't remember exactly who else, but I know those got some money based on some of the equipment that they had to buy to get ready to fight COVID. But the majority of it resides within the general fund.
I've shared this before with you, just to share with everybody else to make sure that they know. I think it's really important we set that money aside. If we keep it in the general fund, it will get nickel and dimed and spent on things that are just operational, which is fine. And I believe that the city staff, the mayor's given kind of a directive to kind of come up with some projects or some better strategic use of those funds. And then, of course, that will come to the council. And the council, this is what we're elected to do, is say whatever amount of money is left over, and it's in the millions, how can we strategically address challenges in our community and look at one-time use projects, especially ones that really make an impact and make this city better. You know, I've been on record about saying Fire Station 1 needs addressing, a West Side Precinct needs addressing. I believe the Mead Hawthorne drainage basin. I'm hearing rumblings about the need to look at that. But I think those are the kinds of things that we should earmark these purchases. We know Fire Station 1 is being designed right now. How are we going to pay for it? Well, we can save some vision funds or CIP funds if we look at it. West Side Precinct, we were told several years ago that it needs to happen because of the growth in our community, especially on the west side and the south side of Rapid City. And I know that there are other needs. So I just want to encourage Pauline, you and others to make sure that money's set aside and that just doesn't dwindle down and we ruin the opportunity that we have to really address some challenges in our community.
All right, I've had multiple conversations with the mayor and the department directors probably on a weekly basis about how we need to start investing this money because quite frankly, our money market is giving us pretty much nothing. But to set it aside for that exact reason, to sit down and figure out what priorities that we have as a city, not necessarily as a department. It's always been my belief that we need to find something that at the end of the day will offset what would normally be charged to our taxpayers, so that way the taxpayers see the full benefit of this money. Definitely don't want, I know there's some department directors that, well, we can use COVID for that, we can use the COVID money for that, and I'm the same way. I'm like, I don't want to nickel and dime it to death. If we don't start setting the money aside, it's going to be gone and we don't know what we actually used it for. So I've been preaching to the mayor and the directors that we need to do that. At one point, we had talked about director meeting, set aside one of our specific weekly directors meetings to actually talk about this specific thing. Just trying to nail down the date to do that.
And we need to operate on priority. And I think that's, like, as the elected official side of this, obviously getting the feedback from our professionals within the city. But also we were hired based on priorities that we shared with the taxpayers. And I think, so when I ran, I specifically said Fire Station 1 and West Side Precinct. So I kind of have to, now whether that comes through COVID funds or some other way, that's going to be a drum that I beat. But I think that's a conversation we need to have, because I think we've all been in positions where we have money in our personal accounts, and you may have, and it's easy to spend if it's sitting there if you don't set it aside and use it strategically. And so on a bigger scale, I caution and urge the city, all of us working together to do what's best for our taxpayers.
Well, and that being said, we also don't know what this year is going to bring with new leadership at the federal level, if the vaccine's going to work with the new strain of COVID, what kind of impact that we will have. Typically, and you can see it even with when we spiked compared to other areas of the nation, we tend to lag behind. And so I also don't want to program out all this money and then have something hit where our revenues do see that 12.5% decrease that we had originally anticipated in March, because then what do we do? So while I do think we need to get some programming in place, I don't think we need to program 100% of it at this time.
Spoken like a true financial director who knows that we need to keep some margins in there. So thank you very much. I yield.
Mr. Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A great dialogue between the two of you, Alderman Solomon and Chief Financial Officer Sumption. Thank you for that conversation. I really appreciate your initiative to, don't nickel and dime everything. And if something is left over, I still am an advocate for something similar to, if, and it's a big if there is any money left over, we put it together as a priority list. I'm thinking like a vision fund process or something similar to what the CDBG does. I'm hesitant about bringing it in front of a political body. That's my only concern, is the politics start entering into it if for the remaining funds on it. So I would like to see an advisory group instead of this body start nitpicking it away. So that's all I have, is that I hopefully we do have something left over. And if it is to be utilized for other holes within the budget, then let's take a look at that. But I want to be very cautious about how we spend that money or revenue that's available. So that's why I'm advocating some kind of an advisory group rather than a political process on this. Thank you. Any suggestions, ideas, Pauline, or comments?
I would just make sure you had that conversation with the mayor.
Yes.
Obviously, staff does not have the authority. We would, from my perspective, we have some capital needs out there that we already have a policy in CIP that we follow as far as how monies are prioritized, and it talks about health and safety and that type of thing. And so I foresee that that's the same type of priority type situation that the department directors would look at. If the mayor wants us to take it to a subcommittee afterwards, or look at other requests for funding as well, then that would be up to him. But
yes.
So I would just definitely have that conversation with him.
Count on it. It will be. Yep, it will be done. Thank you. I appreciate the advice.
Great. Anything else, Director Sumption? Okay. Moving along, Public Works. Director Tech, we're back to you. 15 through 26, please.
Once again, thanks, Madam Chair. Let's move through these quickly. Item 15 is a CIP project, part of our process for moving forward with construction projects. Item 16, same thing. We've gone through the interview process, selected a consultant. They'll be doing the design on that project for Wonderland Drive area. 17 is to purchase a bucket truck. That is to replace one of our traffic signal technician trucks, which if you saw it parked in the parking lot, you would be embarrassed. So that's a good investment to help our staff be able to do their job and to keep them safe. So very important. Number 18, we're moving forward with a force main project that's pumping sewage from the Elkvale Road area up over the hill to our wastewater treatment plant. We're going to need to obtain easements. This is an easement that we need to obtain. The purchase price is above what is allowed to be signed by a director. That's why it's in front of you. Item 19 is a sidewalk variance. Staff recommends approve. There are no sidewalks in the area. Rural road sections not practical to install at this time. Item 20 is our annual agreement with the United States Geological Survey. They've been a great partner with us, and we've been a great partner for them over a number of years to provide many different water resource type services. Our stream gauging network that we have around here, which we utilize heavily for a number of reasons, water supply, compliance on our wastewater treatment plant. Anyway, annual agreement. I believe the cost has remained the same over the last 3 or 4 years, so that's a lot of credit to them to keep their costs steady for our taxpayers. Item 21, once again, another sidewalk variance. Recommend approval of that one as well. Once again, I believe a rural road section and not appropriate at this time. Item 22 is a update on the racetrack drainage basin design plan. That's out in the Rapid Valley area. Obviously an area of development. So from time to time, we need to update these plans to make sure that they're reflective of what's on the ground and what master planning efforts in the area are showing that we may need for drainage improvements. Item 23, St. Cloud Street reconstruction project, 5th to Highland. Once again, this is part of the process of any CIP project coming forward to you. This is kind of the last step before the bids are received for the project. All the design work has been done. On Monday night, you'll see a bid for another project that was opened, and we are recommending award, but we'll talk about that Monday night if there are any questions. Items 25 and 26 are both related to the downtown lighting project, the Vision Fund project. Item 3 is a 5th phase, or I'm sorry, item 25 is a 3rd phase for the project. As part of going through the previous 2 projects, the wiring infrastructure was, we were identified to use the existing wiring that's been in place since the early 1990s. It's been identified that it does need to be upgraded to provide longevity for this project. In addition, I believe they're adding a couple more lights or light heads on the poles that they designed. So once again, make the project a little more robust. Probably not to the level of Mr. Evans' liking, but certainly will be a nice improvement. And then item 26 is a construction administration contract for Skyline Engineering with their subcontractor to watch and manage the construction of phase 2 of the project. There will be a lot of concrete work, foundations placed in the ground. So these are all the new lights that will be going in. So that's what that contract is. Any questions?
We have Mr. Evans in the queue.
Funny you should ask, Mr. Tech, because I'm looking back at that November 16th vote we took concerning, was it phase 2 for $2 million? What is the status of that? Did the bids come back, and what were they?
Yeah, the bids came back and they were quite, they were under the proposed amounts.
I've heard they were like $1 million or slightly around there, about 50%. So I hope we do what we promise and revisit the lighting controls in a way that could, you know, set us up for the next 30 years. Here's a picture, and I won't put it up on the board, but you can look at it. This is Flagstaff, Arizona, population 70,000. This is Rapid City, South Dakota, population 70,000. That's a night shot of wasted energy. Red means you're inefficient. This is 2017. Flagstaff, no red. Rapid City, bright red into purple where it almost turns white. That's what those controls will do, is save us millions of dollars over the next few years. So I'm hoping we actually follow through on this little gentleman's agreement we have and do this, because not only is this a map of wasted energy, it's a map of potential tourism dollars bringing people in so they can see the Milky Way at night. Because I went up on to watch the comet to the top of Terry Peak, and I've got news. You can't see anything from the top of Terry Peak anymore because that entire valley near Spearfish and between Rapid City and Sturgis is so filled with light scatter. 15 years ago, not the case. So I see this as also an economic obligation we have. So just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Mr. Nordstrom.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Evans, I just received some correspondence from the lighting engineers, and I don't know if you've seen it, Mr. Tech, but I'd be happy to discuss that information with you offline. There's some issues that need to be dealt with, and I'll be happy to share that information with you. I yield.
Mr. Tech, anything else? Great.
Thank you.
Good discussion. Okay, moving right along, please. Number 27, Community Development Director Young, or Michelle, or both, or one.
Good afternoon. Number 27 is the final recommendations for the CDBG CV funds. This is the second tranche of CARES Act funding, and you did see this on the agenda earlier this month. This is the second time that you've seen it come through. No changes.
Any questions, discussion? Oh, Mr. Nordstrom, thank you. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Ms. Schulke, just a little bit of background on this. Is this tied in with this this second tranche that you're calling it? Is that tied in with the money for the 211 that's coming in after February, or is it two different items?
Those are not only two different items, but the money that I spoke in some detail through that can be accessed through 211 is through the state. The city will not receive that money directly and is not administering that money.
Okay.
The CDBG CV money comes directly to the city.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, because I've been wanting to send people to the 211 as well. So anyway, that's another conversation. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much. Great. 28, 29, under the mayor's office, it looks like they're just standard appointments or reappointments. Any discussion, questions, comments, concerns, complaints? Great. Moving on to 30, Director Landine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope I laid it out in the agenda summary, but this is pretty standard at this point. Some of the lines were a little higher than anticipated, so this may be something we'll have to address at the end of the year. Looking into it, the biggest increase was in the property, and a lot of that has to do with hail. As I indicated, there's not a lot we can do about hail, but we can determine whether or not we're going to make claims to try to help mitigate that somewhat. And my understanding is that Rod Johnson from Public Works has been working with the insurance to kind of analyze the claims and try not to make claims we don't need to in order to keep the premium under control. I did discuss, I do want to meet with Rich McGuire from the insurance committee to talk about our liability in a little more detail and see if there's some things we can do about that. But again, some of that is also not completely within our control. So next year is a bid year, and so we will be seeking. I think we should probably anticipate that rates will go up again next year similarly. In fact, this year some of the increase was probably blunted by the fact that we had a rate guarantee, and we were in the final year of our rate guarantee, so that prevented our rates from going up to probably what they would have if the insurance companies had free hand to set our rates. So while having a competitive bid will certainly help us receive favorable rates,
Without the rate guarantee, we're probably going to see more of an adjustment to market next year.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Great. Anything else we want to discuss while we're all here? Great. Okay, I guess we'll see you on Monday. Thank you so much for your time.